Oh, boy, this movie sucks. In more ways than one. It's a Dracula joke. Come on. What's going on, everyone? James here with another real review, and today I'm giving you my spoiler-free thoughts on The Last Voyage of the Demeter. A big thank you to Universal Pictures for giving me the chance to watch this movie in theaters for review. Now, this is a time where, of course, the writers and the actors are on strike, so without them, this film would not have been possible. So again, we support them, and I really hope that they find a deal that works for them very soon. Today, though, we are talking all about The Last Voyage of the Demeter. It's based off of a single chapter in the novel Dracula. It's also based off of, well, within the story, the captain's log. So they're transporting some mysterious and dangerous cargo from Romania to London. And who do you think's on the ship? Yeah, it's Dracula. The film is directed by, and forgive me if I mispronounce his name, André Øvredal, and he also directed Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, a movie I didn't really love. And the film is written by two screenwriters, Zach Olkowicz and Bragi F. Schutt, and it's starring Corey Hawkins, Liam Cunningham, Aisling Franciosi, and David Dastmalchian. Now, for me, the big draw was Corey Hawkins. I actually didn't even know Liam Cunningham was in the film until the movie started. I didn't see any trailers for this movie. I saw some key art and posters, but I never really knew much about the cast, so it was a nice surprise for me, probably not a surprise for you. But Corey Hawkins is an actor who I believe is on the rise, and he's so good at grounding the movie or any sort of project that he's in, so I was excited to see him take on the lead role in a horror movie. Now, did it work? Okay, we'll talk about it, but before we do, if it is your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James, where I love talking about movies, TV, and all the news in between. So if you do too, hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, tap on that bell, and like this video if you want to see more reviews just like this. And also get loud down below in the comments and let me know which Dracula movie is your favorite. I don't know if I really have one. Alrighty, you guys, so let's begin on an optimistic note and start with my positives. So, yeah. It starts with Corey Hawkins. He is the best actor in this film alongside Liam Cunningham. Both of those performances really keep this movie afloat when it is feeling like it's going to sink. And no, that's not another ship pun, but I do believe that Corey Hawkins was a little bit held back. You can tell that he is much more of a dynamic performer, especially in his previous projects, but in this movie, it feels like he's muted just a tad. However, he does his best within the confines of this pretty weak script. Corey Hawkins plays someone who wants to just get back to London. He's a practicing doctor and unfortunately suffers from, at the time, lots of racist practices where people just don't want to hire him based on the color of his skin. So there's a tad bit of social commentary in the film as well, even though it doesn't necessarily fit in as naturally as I believe the screenwriters wanted it to, but Corey Hawkins is the right man for the job. He is so good in this lead role, and yes, he can fit in this horror landscape so well, and I just wish that they utilized him better, but he does deliver, in my opinion, the best performance in the film. And then there's his number two, which is Liam Cunningham. We know him from Game of Thrones fame, but this is an actor who's storied. We know him, we know he's going to deliver a big performance, and he does at times, and it calls for that, especially in moments with his son aboard the ship, the Demeter. So Liam Cunningham, again, he's captain of the ship, he's got to be big, he's got to be brave, courageous, and willing to keep the ship together, so he does a pretty good job in this movie as well. I also thought that The Last Voyage of the Demeter set up a nice foundation for what could have been a great movie this summer. Well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. Seriously though, the atmosphere in this movie is very scary. You know, it's creepy to be aboard a ship where you are trapped and bound by the sea. You can't go anywhere. Dracula's on board. Where are you going to go anyway? It's got wings, right? But I love the fact that this movie plays to that atmosphere sometimes, especially in these scary moments involving Dracula. There were some moments where I admittedly jumped. You know, the jump scares were kind of effective, at least in the first half of the movie, before the film got predictable. But I loved that at least the foundation for the film was present. I could imagine where they could have gone And I hate to do a lot of these hypotheticals, but that's exactly what this movie is pretty much all about, which is giving you a nice idea. It just doesn't necessarily execute on that idea very well. But we're not in the negatives yet, right? I gotta stay positive. One thing I also wanted to point out is there were some good supporting performances here too. Performances that weren't necessarily in the lead role, but they got a decent amount of screen time, and that is David Dastmalchian, who continues to just prove the man is a chameleon. He can be in any role possible. You give him a script and he will deliver on that. So David Dastmalchian plays the second in command to the captain, who is played by Liam Cunningham, and he does a good job. I also found that Aisling Franciosi's performance as Anna was fine. Yeah, she was good. Again, I think a lot of these performances are held back by the screenplay. There's just not much for them to chew on, so they deliver in moments, but as an overall film, the movie has a lot of limitations, which holds it back from being as enjoyable as it could have been. So I'm going to be honest, those are the only positives I have in this movie, because otherwise, The Last Voyage of the Demeter is probably the last time we're going to get a story in this universe. Guys, I think that The Last Voyage of the Demeter is really disappointing and, quite frankly, laughably bad at times. Seriously. I laughed at the end with one line and I thought, this is dumb. This is just ridiculous. Giving me Batman versus Superman vibes. I'm not even kidding, there's a line in there that is almost directly stripped from BVS. You will. It's insane. The writing in this movie is quite literally some of the worst writing I might have seen all year long. It does not take a lot to make audiences scared of Dracula being on board a ship in the middle of the ocean where there is literally nowhere to go. And messing that up is quite the task. We have really underdeveloped character moments. There's a lot of half-cooked ideas present, very generic dialogue as well between our characters that kind of takes you out of the elements of the film that work, which are the Dracula moments, right? The tension is also broken when you find yourselves in the middle of a conversation that just does not click or resonate, and I really do believe that with a new group of writers, yeah, this movie could have worked much better. And it's not just the writing in this movie that leads to its downfall. It is the direction by André Øvredal as well. Now, like I mentioned at the top of this review, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is not a film I found to be quite effective, and it was really boring. Unfortunately, André Øvredal just can't nail horror. There's no sense of stakes in this movie at times, and it's very surface level. There's a lack of style, and it seems like even though the foundation is there, like we talked about earlier, the execution is not. This feels very fake, artificial, and at times I almost felt we're going nowhere fast. There were a lot of instances where things just felt shallow, and I was not a big fan of how the story was progressing. The movie does tend to take itself very seriously at times, and that's okay, because I don't want just a straight-up jump scare fest, but André Øvredal cannot direct outside of those Dracula moments. There's just not enough of a cadence, a rhythm to this movie, and by the time we get to the end, they leave the door open, possibly for a sequel, and I'm thinking to myself, no, that's not going to happen, because we didn't spend enough time finding that motivation to really root for these characters. Instead, the film was like, well, all signs point to Dracula, so let's just focus on that, when we really should have spent a lot more time developing and understanding our characters. So when you couple some pretty poor writing with pretty poor directing, what's left? Well, I gotta say, guys, there are just some technical elements here that take you completely out of the film. Now listen, now I know I'm a scaredy cat, but I was willing to be immersed in this movie. Let me go ahead and spend some time aboard the Demeter and feel that dread, the fear, right, that these crew members supposedly are feeling. Well, let's be honest, guys. Half of the time, this movie you could feel like you were on a soundstage. And that is not great, especially when you start to notice some of the very obvious green screen moments and times where the VFX work is not exactly the best. Now, do I think all of the visual effects are terrible and all of the makeup is bad? No, I mean, I think the creature design for Dracula is not terrible. It's pretty scary, but they just kind of revealed Dracula too many times for me to be scared. And then I started noticing the VFX deficiencies, and I'm like, oh, okay, there's a reason why we are seeing a lot of this in the dark, because it sort of masks a lot of the, well, rougher around the edges kind of VFX work. And then eventually we see so much of Dracula that all of that, well, feeling of dread goes away. Yeah, there's a lot of predictability to this movie, and you would think, okay, well, if we're failing in this department, let's hope everything else picks up. Maybe the score, the cinematography helps kind of get you back into it once everything is really revealed. But no, unfortunately the score is pretty pedestrian, and I thought that the cinematography was just okay. I mean, there's really nothing there for me to rave about, but there's also nothing that it does to help get the audience into the film. Yeah, I just genuinely thought that on a technical note, The Last Voyage of the Demeter really was just not exactly where it needed to be to make this an effective horror movie. Alrighty, well, I feel bad continuing to go on with my list of negatives, so now that I'm looking back on my positives, and I of course have to look at the negatives, what do I really feel about The Last Voyage of the Demeter? Well, y'all, oh gosh, I mean, I guess if you couldn't guess it by now, I just am not a big fan of this movie. I thought it was very middling. Sometimes, like I mentioned, it's laughably bad, but this is a film that could have been so much better. This is a movie that has the foundation for what could be an effective summer horror movie, and the elements are there. You have Corey Hawkins, Liam Cunningham, you have a good premise. You're aboard a ship with Dracula in the middle of an ocean, I don't exactly know which ocean they were in, and then you just ruin that. And that's a problem for me, where you have lots of elements that work and you can clearly tell what unfortunately didn't allow them to come together, and that is the direction, the writing, the predictability of this movie, the poor technical elements, and a base that just never is fed into. We have, again, a ripe, or at least a story that is ripe for good storytelling, and we just don't get any good character moments. We don't get a lot of dread that I felt after the first 20 minutes. You know, there's a lot of moments here that just feel meh. And that's not great, because I walked out of the theater thinking, yeah, they probably could have saved this movie. And when I mean saved, I mean it like they could have just kept it in the drafts. What could have made this a good movie, though, is having a better team of writers and a director with a little bit more style. At this rate, I'm willing to bet that André Øvredal just cannot nail the horror genre. Maybe he needs to explore outside of horror, but it just does not seem like he's ever a good fit, unfortunately, when his name is alongside a movie title that is supposed to be a horror film. It doesn't work. I'm sorry, this movie is just a really, really forgettable film, especially as we leave summer and enter into fall. This movie's going to be forgotten about. I mean, I would probably give it like a 2.5 out of 5, just because Corey Hawkins, Liam Cunningham, David Dastmalchian, and Ainsley Franciosi at times try to save this movie, and they do their best. But it's a shame that the talents are wasted in a film that is otherwise really just sunk and buried by this point. So there you have it, y'all. That's my real review of The Last Voyage of the Demeter. Again, I hate being negative on the channel, but at times I just gotta be super honest and give you that negative review for a film that I didn't really like. But hey, if you watch it this weekend and you enjoy it, let me know down below in the comments, and let's have a discussion about The Last Voyage of the Demeter. And if you haven't already, hit that big red button below, subscribe to the channel, because we got some fun videos on the way as we head into fall. We're still going to be talking about The Dragon Prince Season 5, and we're going to begin my reviews and reactions for The Ultimatum Season 2. Yes, trashy Netflix reality television is back once again. Alrighty, y'all. Well, I'm going to go ahead and start preparing for my next review, which might have to do with a certain beetle that's blue. Alrighty, y'all. Again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you at the next screening.